Done.
And we are live.
Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
everybody. And hey, so welcome to the interview. I am so sorry. I've owed you an interview for so long, and it's so good to actually see you face to face.
I know, I think we've known each other for almost a couple years now. Known each other.
Yeah, yeah. It's so weird too because it's like you see somebody's name, you message with them, and you chat, but then you don't actually ever talk, and then it's like, oh, here you are in in the
Yeah,
flesh.
yeah, it's so exciting.
Yes. So, to everybody who's joining on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, hello. We are doing this live so that you can drop your questions, thoughts, comments in the chat box as we go through. And if you're watching the replay, you can still drop your questions in the comment box because I know where KA lives on Instagram and I can send her a message.
Yes.
But we're welcoming K.A. Hightower today, who is the author of The Witch Trials and has more books in the works. And as I said, this is long overdue. I'm so excited just to be here with you and talk about your book. So, why don't you introduce yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Kay, the K and the K.A. Hightower. I am from Oregon. Raised here, still had a brief stint in Washington and moved back because we missed it so much. I'm married, been married for 5 years now. We have two kids, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. I love my family. They're very supportive in
Oh,
this
I love
journey.
that.
Yeah,
Because it's really not a solo sport when you've got a family on the side, too. It takes a lot
it's
of
really
time
not.
and sacrifice.
It does, yeah, and I'm really lucky with how supportive they are. I mean, even my daughter, oh my gosh, we'll be doing something and she'll go, "Mom, shouldn't you be writing?"
Oh,
I'm like, "You're right, I should be. Thank you. I'll go do that."
oh, no pressure.
No pressure. No, none.
Oh my goodness. So, how did you get into writing?
Yeah, so um, I think like a lot of authors, I've wanted to be a writer, an author for a long time, but I distinctly remember in seventh grade we were doing the state writing assessment, where the one where you get to pick one of two or three options and you have to write something. And I picked the fiction option. And I wrote this story and I really loved doing it. It was so much fun. And the teacher, came and talked to me and she's like, that was such a good story. Have you done writing before? Is it something you're interested in? And I hadn't even considered it before that, but I just loved doing it so much that from that point on, I spent all my time writing stories. And, it took, and I think I finished my first book when I was 16.
Oh,
It was
wow.
terrible. It will never see the light of day, but I did it. And just ever since, yeah, since I was 12, I've just constantly been writing in notebooks and on the computer. And uh, it took until I was almost 29 to finally publish one, but I did it. And it was, it was an amazing feeling.
That's awesome. And I love that you were brave enough to actually write in the notebooks because, like, a lot of us are guilty of buying these beautiful notebooks and then we're like, I can't write in it. It's too beautiful.
I have a number of those where I'm like, this is too pretty to write in. So I have a lot of just, cheap notebooks that I write in, mostly just notes. But when I was younger, it was, I would write entire chapters in a notebook and then type them up.
Wow. So, The Witch Trials is your debut novel.
Yes.
And how did that come to be? What inspired you to write that one and put that one out first since you've been writing so many stories?
Yeah. Well, it was almost 2 years ago. I My husband and I were in our room and I was reading and I finished a book and I hadn't really been writing for a while because COVID had happened. And at the time I was working for a retirement community. And so I was working insane hours, keeping everyone
Mm.
safe. And I had an hour commute both ways. So I was always exhausted. And I finally had this desire to write something. And I just remember laying in bed with my husband and talking about this idea that I had. And he's like, you really should start writing this. And so I quit my job in July of 2020. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it was hard. I was there for
congratulations.
almost 10 years. It was a really tough decision.
Oh.
Yeah, but um, my daughter was going into school and she was going to be doing distance learning, and I needed to be home for that. So it was right for us, but it gave me the time to start writing again. And I remember I wrote probably about 30,000 words, and it was going and it was going really great. And then I realized that they were the wrong age, and I needed to
Oh.
age all of my characters up. And so I scrapped everything and started over, um, which is so tough. But sometimes
Mm.
you have to kill your darlings, right? So
Oh yeah, yeah.
killed a lot of darlings that day, but I think it was for the best. And yeah, it turned. I think it took probably about three months to finish writing just the first draft. But it just sometimes a story just flows, and it came. That doesn't always happen with every idea.
Yeah. I think that's so normal too. If you're a writer watching and you're like, "Oh, I thought it was only me." You're not alone.
No, I think I probably have 10 or 12 not even half written stories on my Google Docs that I've been gradually kind of working on or abandoned.
Mhm. Yeah. And then if you're a reader watching, you might be really surprised that there's so many revisions that go into a book, because I know when I first shifted from avid reader into looking at the professional process of this back when I was taking classes in college, I was like, I had no idea there were this many steps. You sort of get this idea that like Tolkien sat down and wrote his whole book and then that's how it went to press, and then it's like, no, that's not how this works at all. And it's so great of your husband just to be on board and supportive from the time you're sitting there in bed talking to him about the story to
Yeah, he's a good sounding
getting.
board. Yeah. And you're right. I think especially for newer authors or young authors or writers, you see the finished product and then you write yours and you go, oh, this isn't good enough. It's not as good as theirs. And I think until you really understand the full process of what it takes to get a book from start to finish, it can kind of it can hurt your self-esteem thinking I'm
Mm-hmm.
not as good as they are because your first draft wasn't as good as their final draft. Especially for looking at trad published authors who have all
Mm-hmm.
that backing to get the professional editing and beta readers, and probably goes through 10 different edits before you see the final product, and it can be discouraging. But once you do it and you get to the end, it's so rewarding.
Yes, definitely. So, what was your favorite part of self publishing for the witch trials?
Probably the first draft, just because in the past, I'd let myself get bogged down in editing as I went. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
this time around just said, you know what, just don't look back, just write it to the end. And it kept me excited the whole time so that there wasn't, I think your writing brain and your editing brain are two very separate things. And if you get stuck in edit mode, it can make writing harder. And so I didn't let myself
Mm-hmm.
do that. And I let myself just write to the end. And it was so much fun getting to know the characters and the worlds. And it's a lot more fun than the editing stage, personally.
I agree, even though I'm an editor. I love the
Yeah.
writing, and then when it gets to the revising, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But you have a gorgeous cover. I dropped the link
Thank
in the
you.
comments for everybody, and it's also in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about the witch trials, what it's about, and who the
Yeah.
main character is, and what they're like.
Sure. So it's a dual POV. It follows a young woman, she's 22-ish. She is going through a really tough time in her life. She had to drop out of school to help support her parents. Her dad has cancer. She's just going through a lot in life. And then she finds out that she's a witch. And she meets Rowan, who is the other main character. And Rowan is at a point in his life where he's kind of figuring out what he's going to do within his community. And he really wants to be a warden, which is kind of a police officer in the witch world. But the next step for him is to mentor another witch through the witch trials, which is a series
Oh.
of trials that you have to complete before you can become a member of the coven. And he gets assigned to Mirren, and he shows up and realizes she has no idea she's even a witch. And
Oh gosh.
so he kind of has to, go through convincing her that this is real, and kind of teaching her how to use magic and from the beginning. So it's a challenge for both of them. But for Rowan, it's an opportunity to move his career forward, and for Mirren, it's an opportunity to potentially save her dad's life. So
Wow. I
yeah.
love that. So who was more fun to write?
Mm, I'd say probably Rowan, just because he already has all of the knowledge of the universe. So he was kind of more fun to write the internal monologues of. Um, my favorite person to write is actually another character that comes in book two. She is just really fun. Her name's Tessa. So she is in book one a little bit, but she comes into book two more. And she's just very fun and energetic and bubbly and a go-getter. And she's really fun to write.
And so book two is up for pre-order, I
Yes.
think, on Amazon. That's the Obsidian Blade. And if
Yes.
you haven't seen the covers, here's a link to the whole series on Amazon. But you should definitely take a look at these covers. They are gorgeous. Did you design them yourself?
No. No, I have an incredible cover designer. Her name's Maria Spada. I found her on Instagram actually because I was at the point where I realized I needed to start thinking about covers and cover design, and I had no idea where to start. And so I
Mm.
think I just searched the hashtag fantasy covers or something like that, or urban fantasy, and I stumbled on Maria, and I loved her pre-mades that she had up. So I messaged her, found her website, and she's done both of those covers and will do the third one in the series. She also did the cover for the prequel, which is free if you sign up for my newsletter, called Mace. Uh, yeah, that one is beautiful as well. She's very talented. Highly recommend her. Um, I always want to brag about her, but then I always get nervous that she's going to get too much, and then it's going to take forever to get my cover. Like, she's amazing, but don't everyone go. I need her to do one more.
Right. So yeah, if you're watching this as a reader and this is your first encounter with like the self-published indie authors, we coordinate all of our own marketing, editing, cover design, and all of that, which is a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of learning and sourcing and looking because there's a lot of great cover designers out there for different styles. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
awesome to see that you found a designer. I mean, it's truly the covers are gorgeous. You've got the gold and green going on with the witch trials, and then that purple in the obsidian
Yes,
blade.
I know.
Ah,
I told she asked what colors I wanted, and I told her to just run with it. What do you think would look good? And she did an amazing job.
I think I can actually. I'm going to see if I can show the cover on here because I feel bad talking about it, and people be like, "What?"
What does it look like?
Here we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So yeah, the witch trials is the first one. That's the one that's out right now, and then there is the one up for pre-order for the Obsidian Blade, and it's coming out in December, and super
Yes.
excited about that.
Yes.
Um, so yes, so why go self-published? Since we're talking about all the extra work on our end that goes into it, and obviously you've got a great story, you've got a great dream and great experience. So why go the self-published route?
Yeah. It took a lot of research. Uh, back when I wrote my very first book in high school, at that point in time, that was 2009. the indie publishing community was very tiny. And at the time, everyone had that point of view that you only indie publish if you're not good enough to trad publish. And
Yes.
for a long time, I felt that way. And then I started realizing that a lot of those books that I'm buying and a lot of them that I'm reading are indie published authors, and their covers are gorgeous and their editing is fantastic and they're doing really well. Maybe this is an option. And so I started looking more into it and discovered the book talk and bookstagram communities and realized that this might be a good option for me. And then I looked into the road of traditional publishing and how much work that is. And I thought, either way, it's a lot of hard work. I like that I have more control over everything if I self-publish, if I indie publish, and I like that I could potentially get a higher return on investment if
Yes.
I indie publish because you don't have to pay. I think in trad publishing typical is about 10%,
Right.
and then you have to pay your agent if you have one, um, and with indie publishing, I mean, I if I sell a book for $2.99, I get $2 of that. So that looked pretty good, also.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, people, if you're watching and you're an author and you're like, what do I do? What advice would you give them to keep in mind if they're trying to decide, should I traditional, should I go indie, should I do hybrid?
Mm-hmm. I would recommend. I One thing that helped me is I joined the 20 books to 50K group.
Oh, yeah, that's a great group.
They're a fantastic group. Wide for the Win is also a really good author writer group. I joined those and I kind of just lurked for a long time. And people will ask questions, and the best, my favorite posts are people who have done it and are successful, or even maybe they're not successful, but they're still learning. They'll make this long post of exactly what they've done, and they'll tell you the mistakes that they made, and they'll tell you what worked for them and what didn't. And that helped me learn so much about what to try and maybe what not to try. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. People have
Mm-hmm.
been doing this for years now, decades almost now. And I would recommend starting there, finding a group, or finding maybe another author to mentor you. That's a great option too. Just don't
Mm-hmm.
get discouraged. There's a lot of info out there. Take it one step at a time. Don't get bogged down by all the details because you think, oh, you have to do the cover, the editing, beta readers, putting it up on all the platforms and all of that. It's a lot, but if you just take it one step at a time, it's not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sort of approached mine the same way, but in reverse. I got the mentor, like you mentioned, first,
Mm-hmm.
and then through the mentor, connected with different sort of priorities for my books and why I was publishing and what I hope to get out of it. And those are all things that if you're a writer watching, you can sort of keep in mind as you look through and go, okay, this is for me or this route is for me, because not every book is going to be best published the same way. And
Right.
we have freedom of choice in this
Yes.
economy. So, how
Yes.
many books do you have planned so far for the witch trials, or do you know? Is it still like unfolding?
Initially it was only going to be 3 books, and then I sat down one day and I thought, you know what? I really need to figure out exactly what's going to happen because I mean, I kind of pantsed the first one a little bit. If you know what that means, a pantser is someone who doesn't
Yeah.
plan, they just write and hope that it turns out well. Yeah, yeah. And after the first one, I thought, okay, I need to start actually plotting a little bit so I can figure out where this is going. And I realized that it's probably going to be 4. And then the prequel short story novella, I guess it's kind of a novelette, um, to kind of give some backstory. And then there's the potential of a prequel also. So potentially 5, I guess.
That's awesome. I mean, the
Yeah,
stories hijack sometimes. It seems like
I
like
do.
here's the plan, and then
Mm-hmm.
you fall in love with a character, and you just can't let go.
Yes. And then the characters can hijack the story too. You think one thing's going to happen, and then you get to know them more, and they're like, that's not what I would do. I'd do this. And they're like, well, that's going to create an entirely new storyline that I'm going to have to follow. We're like, yep, yeah, you will.
So yours, it's YA, right? Or is it new adult?
Yeah, it's kind of older YA, bordering on new adult. There's some romance in it, but it's not. I wouldn't call it spicy romance. It's, low on the chili pepper rating there. Um, Book two has a little bit more spice to it, but again, nothing explicit. Fade to black kind of thing. So yeah,
Awesome. So a little bit of romance, a little bit of
yeah.
adventure, a lot of magic.
Yes. My sister read the first one twice, and she's been my alpha reader for book two, and she's been pushing me to add more spice to it, and she asked why I didn't make book one more spicy, and I told her it's my first book. I know that dad is going to read it. I couldn't I couldn't do it knowing that he was going to read that. I feel like he probably won't read any of the others because this isn't really his thing, but he'll definitely read the
Oh,
first one. So that was the reasoning there.
yeah, I love that. You
Yeah.
can always go off and write other spicier books later if that's what you want to
Exactly.
write.
Exactly. Which may be, but for this one, we're gonna keep it a little more PG.
Yeah, well, and something too that I love and admire about that route for a first book is these characters don't know each other, and I sort of fall into the train of reader that loves stories where the relationship decides what is most natural and goes at its own pace.
Exactly.
So, better to just let it unfold than to
Hmm.
force it in there where it's not needed quite
Exactly.
yet. Not
Exactly.
that I have anything against instant romances, I like those too, but every
Oh,
story
no,
is
those are
different.
great. Yeah. But I think you can tell when it comes naturally in the book and when it's kind of forced. And I agree. I think in this instance especially, it would not have come naturally if anything super big like that happened in book one
That's
for
right.
them.
Oh, so I know we've got people viewing. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're going to go through a couple pre-submitted ones, which should give you guys time to type your questions in, whether that's about the writing or publishing journey or about the Witch Trials series itself. And thank you, everybody who's on. I know it's a Sunday afternoon. It's really rainy and sort of dreary here, but it's got to be
Oh, is
bright and
it?
sunny somewhere.
It's bright and sunny here. Yeah, we've had very wet spring, and the last couple of days have been sunny and 75, so I'll take it.
Wow. So, if you were approached, this is one of our pre submitted questions. If you were approached by a traditional publisher for the Witch Trial series, would you consider signing it over, or do you want to just retain that and maybe pursue a different book traditional, or are you just going to be self published?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I think for this series, I probably would want to um, keep it indie published, just because I already have my plan in place and I don't really want to disrupt that. I would consider it for another book, just because, I mean, traditional publishers, they have that backing. They can put more into marketing than I can at this stage in my career. Um, so I would consider it. Probably not for this series, though.
Here's one. How dark is your series?
Mm. Um, so it is YA, so it doesn't get too insanely dark, but there are definitely some darker moments. The trials that Mirren has to go through are basically, in the world there are other magical beings. There are the Fae and different shifters, and then there are the witches. And on the totem pole, the witches are at the top. And uh, basically, the premise is that there was another world where the fairies lived, and a long time ago, their world was dying, and they came over to our world, and there was this huge war, and the one of the witches a long time ago was able to kind of close that portal off, cutting off the fae that were here from their homeland.
Aw.
And yeah, and every year, in order to keep the portal closed, they have to sacrifice uh, people, basically use blood magic. And so basically, in order to become part of the coven, you have to track down three supernatural criminals, basically people who have done something bad, and arrest them and bring them into the coven where they're going to be sacrificed in order to keep this portal closed. And so that can get pretty dark, and that's definitely something that Mirren struggles with internally, kind of knowing what is going to happen to these people, and that's a big quandary for her throughout the series.
So, sort of maybe a dark undertone to what she's doing,
Yes.
but not necessarily super graphic in detail.
Right. Yeah.
And then Zara, hey Zara, says, great talk today. Your enthusiasm for your characters and story is so strong. How do you decide how much to reveal in an interview like this and how much to hold back for readers to discover? I love that question.
That's a great question. Oh, I thought about this before we started. Like, I don't want too many spoilers. So basically, I said anything that you could either find from the back cover or anything that might be within the first 5 or so chapters. I'm comfortable with revealing, and maybe as we go, I'll think more about that. But yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail or reveal too much, because there are definitely some spoilers and some twists that you'll have to read to find out.
Enough of a hook without
Yes.
too much. That's the whole balance of author stuff in general, though, is how much to put in the first sentence, how much to put in the first chapter, how much to put on the back cover. It never ends.
It's yes. Honestly, I think the hardest part of this whole process was the blurb.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I can write blurbs for other books, no problem. For mine, there's so many options, and yeah, how much do you reveal and how much do you not? What's important to know right off the bat, and what do you want to hold back so that there's that surprise when they read it? It's a tough balance.
Yes, it is. And then still make it, pitchable so that people want to read more,
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So one that I got is, your story is young adult, new adult. Will it stay in that age range as the series goes on, or will it transition to adult?
It'll stay in the young adult, new adult. It might, as the series goes on, move more into new adult than young adult. But I don't plan on taking this particular series, into the adult realm.
And what books do you like to read? Oh, I love this one. So do you read the same genre you write?
I do. I read a really wide range of books. Actually, you can kind of see it back here. This whole shelf is my physical TBR, and it's got everything from memoirs to young adult to adult fantasy, contemporary romance. It's historical romance. It's kind of all over the place, but I'm a mood reader, so I have to just follow the mood. I can try to plan, okay, I'm going to read this week and this next week, and have an order, and then inevitably I'll be halfway through a book that I'm forcing myself to read, and I'll end up putting it down and starting the one that I've been thinking about for the last week. I almost always go back and end up finishing those books that I start. I don't like not finishing, even if I'm not enjoying it at the moment, just because I found that just because I wasn't into it in the moment doesn't mean that it's not a great book that I'm going to love.
Yeah.
So it's all over the place.
Yes, it is.
All over.
So
But
the
yeah.
last one is, yes, so Kay does have a newsletter. We talked about that a little earlier in the interview. The links to her socials and website should be in the description if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Now, if you're on Twitter, I couldn't load the description links there because it's too short, so you'll have to hop on over to YouTube or Facebook or Instagram to get it. But if you sign up for Kay's newsletter, you do get that free, is it novella from the Witch Trial series. You can try out her work there.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining today. Again, I'm so excited after so long to get to meet you.
Thank you for having me. This was exciting. This is my first author interview that I've done. So.
Oh, wow, you did fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm really nervous.
Ah, well, you don't
Oh,
show it at all.
oh,
So
good.
yes, it's all good. You did awesome. Well, thank you, and thank you for everybody who watched. We are in the middle of a 10-day author interview series that corresponds with a lot of people's Kindle Countdown weeks, actually. So tomorrow I'll be back here with C.K. Sorens to talk about Trimart and a special project. And
Ooh,
I'm curious to know about the special project.
that's
Um,
exciting.
yes, and you can go and watch yesterday's, which is the first one. That's Casey Freeman's. She is a multi-award winning indie author, and so we will have authors from all stages of the journey. We've got authors that are debut, we've got authors that are way far down the line and have multiple awards and bestsellers, and just get their insight on writing, publishing, and what they're working on. And in the meantime, check out Kay's work because it looks awesome and the covers are beautiful. And I sort
Thank
of
you.
want a paperback for the cover.
I know. Yes, that's exciting. Holding it in your hands.
Yes. Well, all right. Take care. Everybody have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.